Hi, Tim.
Hello, Sid.
Good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. What about yourself?
Oh, I'm fine too. Recently, we had the Diwali festival, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, food and dress, nice dress, kids having fun, some sparklers.
mm
So, festival mood, huh? I would
mm
say.
So, and Diwali is, let's say, the big festival because I know in India you have many festivals.
Yes, one of the biggest, yes.
Yeah.
Depending on
So,
parts of India, but from the major part
mm
of India, it is the biggest, yes.
okay. But now yourself, you've been living in Denmark, in Copenhagen for many, many, many years. But you still have a Diwali.
Absolutely. Yes, I live in Denmark, but I'm an
mm,
Indian guy living in
mm,
Denmark. So, so I actually celebrate both. I also have
Okay.
Fastelavn and other things I do
Okay.
celebrate.
Yeah.
Along with Christmas.
All right.
All right. How about other things? What's news? Anything you want to share
Yeah,
today?
what's news? Well, you mentioned festivities. So what we've been celebrating is yeah, a few awards. Um, so we were awarded a Success Company, Success Virksomhed, like they say it here in Denmark, which is an award by BDO and Spar Nord, yeah, one of the bigger banks in Denmark, based on, let's say, criteria, objective criteria, numbers. So where we are, let's say, one of the more sustainable, healthy, solid companies in Denmark. I think within the top 1%, if I understood it well. So that's always nice to receive that recognition from the outside. I'm always unexpected, but really good with that recognition. Let's say from outside to be noticed. Then very much, let's say, from within the inside. Yeah? Being a open text partner and open text solutions being at the core of what we're doing. There we also got the quarterly Navigator Champion award,
Yeah.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is a yeah, kind of a premium partner awards that OpenText gives to a very selective number of partners. I believe four globally every quarter. So it's something we're also super excited and super proud about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we cannot thank our team enough who have been working hard to make all of this happen. So
Exactly,
it's super proud of
exactly.
the entire team, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not like the actor with the Oscar. I'm more like the director, getting the Oscar. But it's the team, right? And somebody's orchestrating, like a director for the movie. But yeah, without a good team, going from the actors themselves, but also the cameramans
Uh,
and all the logistics. I think indeed it's a super team effort.
uh,
Yeah. So that's really good.
nice.
Good. But what about in your space of invoices, invoice management? What's happening?
I mean, it's a very fast moving space, right? Nowadays, technology moves so fast and everything around it even faster. Uh, but one of the things I would like to mention today that I'm talking more and more often with every customer is e-invoices and in context of more automation.
Hmm
So, and how is it similar or not similar to the EDI invoices?
Mm,
Because if you put out the words EDI, e-invoice, electronic invoice, and automation, it somehow seems in our mind they are all the same and connected.
mm,
Or is there any difference? So
mm,
that's a discussion I'm having a lot nowadays, and very interesting discussion, and I think it's a very relevant discussion
mm,
in the enterprise invoicing segment. Now, if you look at EDI, that has been there for a long time. That's more of a electronic way of exchanging information, but used to be point to point. You create a network from, let's say, virtual private network from your organization to another organization, and then you exchange data, right? Which could be orders and invoices and deliveries and such. Then you also have the concept of information superhighway, right? Virtual private networks, which is shared by others. But then you
mm,
could still send messages, internet being an example on a which is a shared internet information network where you can have private network similar, but you can still send messages, invoices, orders, and that's actually the backbone of how people or enterprises built up their whole, let's say, eh, EDI network, so to speak, and that has been in place for many years. Recently, we start hearing more about e-invoices. They are not the same as this EDI invoice setup that we know for many years. Because what is happening is this started with Latin America many years ago in Brazil, followed by Argentina, Mexico. In Europe, years ago, it started with Italy. Now, more and more countries are coming up. It's about the tax authorities, the tax office of each country getting ahead of the game and trying to understand or trying to know what is the tax liability of every organization. Yeah, what is every organization selling?
mm,
And they're expecting you to send that data through a common agreed XML format. The same data has then to be sent to your own customer. So those are the XML invoices, yeah, which are known as in various names. In Brazil, you call it nota fiscal. In Italy, you call it STI, or you have German format. In various other European countries, there's people. In Denmark, you call it OUBL, and so on. But essentially, it's the XML format.
mm,
And how do you then receive that format? How do you then, what are the information in that particular XML? How do you process this? And since more and more countries are putting it as mandatory with some rules around it, like they start with saying, okay, it has to be a particular kind of invoices above certain limit, only domestic invoices and such, or maybe public sector only. But the agenda is sooner or later they will be covering more and more, right? They will be covering all loopholes. In essence, getting a paper, reading it is too cumbersome, right? So they want electronic way to capture it and know upfront what is the VAT liability, than
mm,
someone reporting it.
mm,
And we see a lot of traction in this area and a lot of interesting discussion and solutions we are building along it, right?
mm,
And
mm,
so many flavors of it.
mm. But if you see the roadmap of these, let's say, the mandatory countries, yeah, because I'm also following that. I think Poland and France and even Belgium, right, is mentioned in the media very frequently. But when it is mentioned and talked about in the media as becoming mandatory, does it mean that an organization has to be able to send an electronic e-invoice in an XML PEPL format, or does it always go one on one together with the tax authorities? That's kind of, if I understood you, what you just explained is that, let's say, organization A sells something to organization B and then has to send the invoice, but it doesn't send the invoice direct. It sends it first to the
Mm.
authorities, who then kind of registers the VAT if relevant in the specific country, and then moves it on.
Yeah, there are different variations of it in different countries, I would say. The whole point being that the tax authorities need to have that invoice when you are sending it out to your customer. Previously, what it used to happen is you used to report to the tax of authorities what you sold, and vice versa. Your customer reported to the tax authorities at the end of the month what they are supposed to pay. So there is a
Mm,
gap. There is a possibility of a mismatch, right? They want to close this. So
mm,
what they want to know is, because it's the same document, right? When you are selling something, that invoice should be registered. How they are doing it is differing a bit from country to country. There are some countries where you have to get the XML from the tax office. Yep.
mm,
So Brazil, for example, or even in China, golden tax. So you have to get the document from the system of the tax office and get the XML from there. There's also possibility you can get a PDF version along with the XML as well.
mm,
And there are some countries where, Denmark, an example, where you don't have to download from the tax office, but it's the same XML, right?
mm,
The XML can be sent to you on an email, for example, or dumped on a folder. But it's the same XML that is also sent to the tax office.
mm,
So depending on which country we look at, there are different variations. And indeed, when it's not about only receiving, right? It's also about sending. And that's why we
mm,
have to look at the business of that organization, saying,
mm,
is there a sales office only? Is there a factory? Are you selling more? Are you receiving more?
mm,
Or both are less? So what kind of setup would make sense?
mm. Okay. Okay, okay, good. But what are the customers unsure about? Because I know that within the existing Vim, yeah, or invoice management customers, um, this is a very hot topic. But what are the type of questions? What are the uncertainties or?
I mean, one of the very common questions I am discussing is there's an impression because for many years we have been saying we have a mapping in IDOC, for example, right? IDOCs were understood by SAP in an invoice IDOC. That's how
Mm.
invoices come. And typically
And
you
an
give an
IDOC, and an IDOC is, let's say, within the past also dealt with the EDI.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So you had a EDI message coming in, which you converted to an IDOC, which is the format
Mm.
that SAP understands or understands since a long time, and then you consume it in SAP.
Mm.
So people try to map it into that setup, saying, okay, this is a new format of XML. I can simply map it. Now, fundamentally, it's not so bad because an invoice has 15, 20 fields, so to speak. And how difficult could it be? But if you scale it up for a global organization, which is in many countries, and each country is having these variations of possibilities, then it's not a scalable job.
Mm.
And being on top of it, saying if and they have some variations, right? Each country has got some its own identifiers or remarks or certain fields, etc. So country specific thing, being on top of them and making sure you always adhere to the right legal you know language is a Herculean task, right? It's not a technical task anymore. And I
Mm.
think making that clear is the first step. And once we make that clear, okay, what does it mean? And if we look at the pace in which these invoices are supposed to come in, right? Each country is planned to be, adopting this in not so distant future, at least in Europe and some
Mm.
parts of Asia Pacific, as I know. Then it seems we have a lot of work to do in a very short time. So, what is the real solution available out there, both on the SAP stack, outside the SAP stack, or other partners who are doing this? Is what my whole discussion time is going
Mm.
around.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because the technical connection to Vim, that's, let's say, the easy part of the equation, correct?
That's the easy part because Vim we can process any invoice, right? Any format you give. The question is how do I receive that?
Mm.
So what's the connection to the outside world? Because once it is in your organization, then Vim can take over.
Mm.
But how do you get it to your organization? Because Vim is sitting within SAP, it cannot receive anything from the outside world.
Mm. Interesting.
Eh,
Interesting.
indeed, indeed, and then connected to that is another topic that comes often is automation,
Mm.
right? So does it mean that e-invoicing will lead to more automation? That's
Shouldn't
a
it?
it's just carrying data in a different format. So if the same vendor has been sending you a PDF, and if you had been using a good OCR, if you are able to capture all the data but still not achieving automation, then e-invoicing will not solve your problem. Still,
Mm.
what it will solve is it will probably eliminate of need of a OCR process.
Correct. So the data quality, in essence, will
Exactly.
or
So there are
should,
levels of it, right? I mean,
yeah,
indeed,
should
it will
should
probably
decrease.
take away one component of the OCR that we
Mm.
don't have to deal with because it will be XML and it's easy to interpret. But the data quality of matching the PO line item and the amount and quantity, or the vendor is
Mm.
correct, or was that a right CVR number or EN number, are still there. So it will to some extent, but what it will definitely do, it will give us better data to, to figure out where the problems are, which may
Mm.
not be so evident when it's a paper invoice or a PDF invoice. It depends on
Mm.
OCR sends and what is passed to SAP. So there could be data
Mm.
lost in translation.
Mm. Okay. But whether mandatory or not, would it also not be, let's say, some kind of a business case, especially for a large organization getting very high volumes, because you're exactly eliminating the OCR step, which in certain
I mean,
cases needs a validation, maybe a manual correction of.
absolutely. I mean, if there is a opportunity to get electronic invoices, so to speak, as EDI or any kind of XML, that should be much easier and flexible and scalable than getting a PDF, because PDFs, even if I have a OCR working 100%, a format change tomorrow will also make it
mm,
not so optimal, right? So we always
mm,
run that risk.
uh,
So for enterprise, it makes sense to go more electronic as much as possible.
mm, mm. All right. What about the storage of these electronic invoice files? Let me call it, because it's not necessarily a document. But is there anything around the regulation that's putting
Well,
some demands there, or?
yeah, I mean the XML itself,
Mm,
right? I mean here often what happens, you have the XML and you have a PDF, or you can have a PDF converted so you can say human readable format. Now the real invoice is the XML,
mm,
and they are often subjected to the same rules that you have for a paper invoice, because you have, if you have to store the invoice, is that XML. Now same case with the EDI. I might convert an IDoc or create a PDF out of it, but if you have to go and argue in court, you have to produce the real EDI message,
the source,
which is the source. Yeah.
mm,
Uh,
untempered.
Untampered source, right? The
Mm,
ADI message that you received. The same with the XML. Now, what happens in Vim is that when we receive the XML, we archive it like we do the PDF, which is a link to the Vim document and eventually any posted document in archive server
mm,
or archive center, which is then pure archive controlled, and it has all the record management around it if it needs to be, and then you can only view it, right? You cannot change it
mm,
and so on.
mm,
So it is treated as any other legal invoice for that matter.
mm. Okay. But that means for organizations receiving, right? Because the ones processing in Vim or the ones receiving it, regardless whether direct or via a middle stop from the government agencies, let's say their liability starts at the moment of receiving it. So that's where the source is. And
Correct.
meaning in the bigger context of also, let's say, cybercrime and cyber security, yeah, when I hear about electronic, the highway and the bus stops, that also means that there could be a potential risk that somebody intercepts an electronic message, tampers with it, adds a few zeros, changes the bank account number, and moves it on.
In theory, yes, right? But
Mm,
that's where I think we are going into the deeper discussion about how to protect and how this could be done. But in theory, yes, it's the same as a paper coming through a post and someone changing the contents of the envelope. In
mm,
theory, it's possible. So,
mm,
what are the safeguards you can have in your organization to check against such let's say dishonest attempts,
mm,
right? If you have a bank account, you should have a bank account of the vendor in your vendor master, and there should be a check saying
mm,
is it matching or not. If not, you should
mm,
stop that invoice, get it cross verified, etc., etc., right? And there are many other. Now we are essentially talking about fraud prevention, and fraud prevention at the receiving point, irrespective of the format, has to be there,
mm,
right?
yeah,
Who, what's the amount, and so on. But yes,
mm,
indeed, but that could become easier because data will be much easier accessible than a
mm,
PDF, so to speak.
yeah. Okay. But that would be until so far the same, let's say, functionality that is already there with Vim in terms of fraud prevention. It's not that we immediately can say, okay, here are a few more additional. It's already there, yeah,
It's already
regardless of
there. It's
the
already there.
format.
I mean, there are some variations, as I say, country specific, if I look at it, but otherwise, on a high level, there are
Mm.
functionalities in already available.
Good, wonderful, exciting topic. Yeah,
Indeed, indeed. I mean, this site, I think, is taking a lot of traction and a lot of discussion, and for the right reasons, because this is changing the landscape as we know.
mm,
But
absolutely.
I'm sure there will be more things happening, and we'll be discussing more and sharing with our followers and listeners uh, on the latest as we progress on this topic.
We definitely will. Good. Great catching up with you again, Sid, as
Same here,
always.
Tim. Same here.
Yeah,
Until next
and thanks.
time,
Yes,
then
thanks to you, and thanks everybody following and listening.
thank you, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye.